Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and I hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. Before we get into it, I want to buy your groceries, and this is something I've been sharing a little bit about, but I am doing a giveaway for a $100 gift card to your grocery store of choice. All you have to do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You'll get entered into that giveaway, and then one of you lucky winners will be chosen. Again, I want to buy your groceries, so let me. So what you need to do is just screenshot that review that you write, send it over to me on Instagram, Facebook, or through text. On Instagram, it's at Nourish with Bailey, and you'll find all the links to all of those resources below. But that is just a very exciting giveaway that I'm drawing for on my birthday actually this year. So July 21st is the last day to get entered, and I will be drawing on that day. So with that, again, if you are loving the podcast, I just ask that you send it to a friend, send it to a family member that you think would be interested. I am really wanting to grow this podcast, not for really even any personal gain, which maybe it kind of subconsciously is. I just want to connect with more people, and I want to have more people listening. I want to be able to get on some really great guests, and all of that's possible because of you, legit because of you. So if you are liking it, just share it, and that just means the absolute world to me. But enough of that. Let's get into today's kind of catch up. I have on a really great guest today, and so I'm not going to give too much of a catch up. I usually have the beginning part of these episodes being very chatty, but with having a guest on, I'll keep it kind of short and sweet. But there's some fun updates that I have to share with you, mostly including the animals on my farm. And if you know me, you know that's probably my biggest passion right now is just those little creatures, and we keep discovering more. So we have 2 cats that are pregnant on our farm, and one of them had baby kittens, and so we've got 4 baby kittens, and they are just the cutest little things. They are so teeny tiny. So we found those on Saturday, and then on Saturday we also discovered that on Friday we discovered we have a raccoon living in the wall of our barn. And my husband, we were looking for the cats, and he unexpectedly stumbled across this raccoon. He showed his flashlight down on the side of the barn. There's kind of hollow walls that they can tuck in. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's a raccoon. And so then my brother and his girlfriend came over on Sunday, and then my brother wasn't too intimidated. Luckily, he looked, and we could just hear this screeching sound, and she has baby raccoons. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with them. Hopefully they, once they grow up, they just kind of leave the area, because we have chickens that we're getting on our farm this week and next week. And so raccoons kill chickens. And so that just doesn't work out, right? But we were just oh my gosh, more things just keep having babies on this farm. It needs to stop, because we're going to have 24 cats and 300 chickens and 4 ducks and 1 dog, and it's just funny. I'm yeah, we're becoming a funny farm for sure. There's just things happening all the time, which also is really fun. I think that part of spring is what I love, is just that new life. And really just things come alive. Everything here is so green. My garden is partially planted. Our last frost will be April 29th, so then I'll start gardening and diving more into planting my flowers. But all really exciting things. I just had to share that because I'm it is chaos over here. We've got too many little critters everywhere, but it's also really fun. Outside of that, the last weekend was so nice. We got to be outside, did some yard work. I put mulch around my garden beds that my dad made me this year. So I'm really excited because I just feel like I have a very organized space outside and a good place to spend my time. I've touched on how last summer I feel like I was just kind of in a state of high stress because of my environment. We were moving from Omaha to here, and I just had things in like 4 different locations at once. Our house was being renovated minorly, right? We did like painting, refinished the floors, and it just was really hard for me to actually like settle in and enjoy last summer. So this summer, I'm just really going to try to absorb every aspect of it, business-wise, personal-wise, gardening, like just savoring every moment rather than feeling like my environment was so ever-changing last spring and summer that I think I just felt a lot of weight of that I didn't genuinely enjoy that nice weather and the time I could be outside. So really just so eager, and I love weekends where it's nice out already just in April, because it's like, okay, like warmer weather's coming, you can actually do things outside. And if you don't live in the Midwest, you won't understand. I was actually in prep for the guest that I'm having on today. My husband's like, okay, so what incredible small beachy town does she live in? Because that seems to be all health and wellness coaches and creators. They just live in beautiful locations. I'm like, we're really having to grind out here in the Midwest because we have to deal with all seasons, and we can't just get outside whenever we want. For some people, seasonal depression is really heavy. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like everybody I talk to in that space lives on some beachy, warm town, and I'm so jealous of it. But she is from the Outer Banks. And when she told me that, we had gotten a call a few weeks ago. And when she told me that, I'm like, hold up. I need to have you on the podcast because your life sounds so different than mine, and I'm so intrigued, and it's just a really fun conversation. But it was just funny because Nate was like, yep, I figured she lived in some incredible little beachy town, and she absolutely does. But outside of that, jumping into how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit. With how I'm nourishing my mind, this is very probably basic, but really getting outside and spending time with the animals on our farm and like digging in the dirt is so therapeutic for me. And I talk about that a lot. So I know, like, yeah, that's probably expected of an answer. But really just like being around animals, I think we kind of underestimate the healing that has for us. Even kind of like finding that inner child. I'm just trying to be so curious and so grateful for what's happening around me. Like I said, with all these little creatures around our farm, I could be like, oh my gosh, this is too much. Like I don't want to take care of all of this. But instead, I'm really trying to just absorb it and find like a joy for taking care of something outside of myself, which I think is just very healing. And it's very healing too to be able to have critters in my space that maybe as a kid it wouldn't have happened. Like growing up, I remember my parents, it was like a 2-cat farm. Like we wouldn't have more than 2 cats, but now we've got baby kittens, and it's like, well, I would just like to have a ton of animals around. Same with like getting baby chicks. That was something we didn't really do growing up so much. As I got older, my parents actually now have a ton of laying hens, but it wasn't like that when I was younger. We would go to Orscheln's and it was like, okay, you can look at the baby chicks, but we're not getting any. And now it's like, okay, but to go to a store and just leave with 4 ducks, it's like I'm doing those things that maybe as a kid I wouldn't have even had that much interest in, but I've developed now an interest in it, and it's just kind of not healing because there's not any like hurt there as a kid that I couldn't do that, but just thinking of all of the things that I want as an adult, you're able to make some of those things happen, which I think is just in its own way. You're able to be more like having that childlike wonder, I think. And I was listening to the What We Said podcast, and they were talking about Amber Fillerup. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she is I don't know, maybe in her 20s, 30s, but she is very into connecting with that inner child. So how she dresses, how she paints, how she does all these arts and crafts and makes everything so magical and such an experience. And she gets a lot of criticism for being a child, right? They'll say, well, you're acting like a child. And she has said so many times there's such a difference between having that childlike wonder, like being childlike, than acting like a child, you know? So it's not like she isn't growing up and she's not still doing adult things, but she's making sure that throughout the heaviness of what can come with living in an adult world, she's still tapping into that younger version of herself and just being creative and using her imagination. And I think that alone has just really changed how I view my life, right? There's so much heaviness. I don't think we can argue that. But with that, to tap into maybe something that as a kid you really love to do, it's not childish to still do that. And so finding ways that you can integrate that into your daily routine, for me, I think has been really, I don't know, it's just been a special experience. And I feel like that's been nourishing my mind and my spirit, honestly, really a lot recently. It's been a way for me to connect with something or connect with that version of myself and kind of escape, not even escape, because we don't always need to escape our daily reality, because I love my life and I'm so blessed for the life that I have, but it just gives us something outside of ourselves to focus on. And I think that is really impactful, and it's really impacting me right now. And then how I'm nourishing my body. This is tough, and I would say this is an area I'm actually probably struggling the most with. And in all transparency, I really struggle with my body image and my external appearance. And that's not something I always talk about, because sometimes it can feel frustrating for me to still be struggling with something, even though I've had years and years to heal it, and I've also helped other women heal it. And so it feels like, well, why are you failing at this if you help other people? And so I think it's kind of almost harder to share that, but I share that very vulnerably, that I still, and maybe it's this time of the year, but I really struggle with body image or thinking about putting on clothes that I wore last summer. I'm just always like, well, I hope this fits. If it doesn't fit, then I would feel really, really turd about myself, in all honesty. And I think that's just something that's always been a struggle for me. I shouldn't say always, probably since about 5th grade, I've just really struggled with that. And looking in the mirror and thinking I look one way one day, and then looking another day and thinking, oh, I look really like maybe thin today. And then the next day I'm bloated, or I'm just not even bloated. I just am like carrying extra weight and water retention. And either it's in my mind, which I know I've been pretty open with, like that body dysmorphia that I feel like I struggle with pretty frequently. But some of it could be physically depending on where I'm at with my cycle, and all of that to say is that then with nourishing my body, some days I'm like, well, I shouldn't eat anything, because historically, if I didn't eat anything, then I would lose weight, right? Or if I would chronically track everything, I would lose weight. And that is not what I believe anymore. And deep down, I do not believe that to be the most effective way to lose weight. And I don't think in any way that that's the healthiest way to approach it. But sometimes I notice myself kind of going back to that old mindset and that old narrative that like I need to do that to lose weight. And I feel like women, maybe at different stages, have all experienced that. And I really, really just pray that you haven't. And I'm so happy for you if you haven't struggled with that, and if you've always just felt very neutral about your physical appearance, because that's incredible. But that's something that I still do struggle with. And so even with the food we've had around our house, I haven't been great on getting groceries. I've been putting random concoctions together, and the food I've been eating probably looks a lot different than when I post on social media, like, oh, look at this great meal. Like, I've really had to scour our house to find food. And it's really all just me doing it to myself, right? Of like not getting groceries, not placing a Walmart order to go pick them up, or just maybe even being kind of lazy with my food prep. And that's not to say I then completely neglect my body, because I'm still focusing on having all 4 components that I talk about, the core 4 method. Again, if you haven't listened to the series I did probably a couple months ago at this point about the core 4 method, I would highly recommend, because it is just like that core breakdown of how I structure my plate to make sure it's always balanced. And I feel like I always accomplish that. But recently I feel like maybe the portions have been smaller and less filling probably than they previously have, because I'm like stuck in that mindset of, okay, you need to lose weight, when in reality, I don't maybe fully believe that. It's just kind of that pattern that seems to pop up every spring to summer. And I hate that. And I hate that it does that. But like I said, it's hard to be fully transparent about that. But I also know with vulnerability comes connection. And so maybe you're experiencing that too. And when I talk about how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit, I think to get on every week and be like, oh yeah, I'm killing it in all these 3 areas is just not always true. And I want to be much more transparent in that. So I guess what I'm really trying to do now is focus on actually filling my body with the nutrients that it needs versus thinking of food in that calorie way. And that's hard because I spent 2 years chronically tracking calories. I would track everything I ate for nearly 2 years, and it was very unhealthy. It was very obsessive, and I avoided a lot of food. And I don't avoid any food groups now. It's how I approach food now is completely different than then. But even thinking about like in the morning, I actually started taking Daily Element, which is like a greens powder, but it's very clean. It's made with microgreens, and that's legit the only ingredient. And I'm really trying it out to see if I like it. And I've been loving the natural energy that gives me in the morning. And I know I'm getting 40 times the amount of nutrients that I wouldn't be if I wasn't taking it. It's honestly an incredible product, and I'll be posting about it in the future just to share more about it. But I've been taking that, and that I just know like, okay, the nutrients I'm getting from this. I'm focusing on like, okay, there's a lot of nutrients there, but I still need to be finding that in my food, right? You can't just take a supplement and magically poof, like every other thing is gone. You never need to eat again. That's not true, because so much of that healing comes from food. But I planted an herb garden, and I have that in my kitchen. So now I'm adding in like parsley and basil and lemon thyme in my meals and finding ways to integrate that in. So I'm trying to kind of counteract maybe the stress around that like negative mindset around my body and needing to lose weight by eating less, by actually just diving into making meals that maybe require a little bit more creativity. And for me, I think there's something very therapeutic about cooking and finding creativity with food. And that's just what I'm trying to do to kind of like quiet that negative voice in my head that is telling me maybe horrible thoughts or negative thoughts about my external appearance. Is okay, well, when I'm in the kitchen, when I'm nourishing my body, I'm going to get creative with it. And we're going to silence the voice that's saying you shouldn't be eating this because you need to be eating less because you've got weddings that you're in and you've got all these things that you historically maybe would view as times in your life to lose weight. We're counteracting that, and we're actually just focusing on the nutrient density of your food and really nourishing your body to give it that support that it needs. And it was interesting because I saw a lot of prom photos this last weekend, and I was looking at these girls in their dresses, and they looked so adorable. And I had kind of memories popping up on my phone about like, oh, it was probably like 8 years ago today. You were at your junior prom. And totally bizarre, maybe junior, sophomore, whatever year it was. And I was looking at me throughout like my freshman to senior year, even just like physically, and where I carried more weight and how I looked in my prom dress. And I remember like the day of prom not wanting to eat anything because you don't want to be bloated or look bad in your dress. And just like the heartbreak that I would have if any girl now was doing that. And I hope if we have any high school girls listening, that was not your mindset going into prom, because historically that was a point in time where I was like, I need to be doing what I can to lose weight. I need to be working out more during track season, maybe having protein shakes for lunch, and then in my dress, I'll look a lot better. And that's one night. And I see that a lot with people when they get married, of like, I'm going on a diet before my wedding, or just all of those significant events. There's so many negative thoughts that come to mind. There's so many things with diet culture that we maybe have been shown historically that we should be doing to look a certain way for those events. And I just think I felt a lot of that with the weddings that are coming up in like May, and then the ones coming up in that next year of like, oh my gosh, like not that anyone is looking at me. Literally, I understand, like no one is looking at me. But at the same time, like you want to feel good in your skin. And historically, I think people would have been like, well, then we should be cutting weight. We should be losing weight. So just trying to silence that voice, which I know can be really challenging. And I'm also working on that too. If you find yourself in that place, just find comfort knowing that you're not alone and that I'm here if you ever want to talk about it as well. Okay. So with that, I said I wouldn't give a chatty introduction, yet here we are. I just chatted for the last 20 minutes, but it's okay. We've got a great guest on. Katie is a fashion photographer. She's also becoming an integrative health coach through IIN, which is actually who I went through to get certified in health coaching. She shares her stories about burnout and how she kind of reached that peak in her career and realized that it wasn't actually fulfilling what she thought it would. Struggled with some health issues, and it led her to now pursue health coaching. And I'm so excited for you to listen to what she has to say. I feel like a huge piece of me starting this podcast was just to give you an idea of other occupations that are out there. There is nothing wrong with being totally fine with the consistency of a 8 to 5 job, right? Or whatever those like maybe normal hours look like for you. For me, I function, I think, a lot better just doing a lot of different things and adding everything into my routine, whereas some people do a lot better with structure. But I want to show you both sides of that. And when I was in I'm still in my early 20s, but when I was in high school and college, I think I put so much pressure on myself to have a normal looking schedule in a normal job that would look really, really good from the outside, but maybe I personally wouldn't enjoy it. And so I wanted to bring Katie on because when I was meeting with her, she was talking about fashion photography and how she's getting away from that. And I was like, hold on, back up. You live in the Outer Banks. You do fashion photography. I need to hear more about this side of your life because to me, that is so intriguing. And I think you're going to find it to be super interesting as well. It just gives you a different perspective and a different side of what life could look like. You know, Katie still went to college. She did the whole thing. But when she got out of college, life looked pretty spontaneous and just that comfort in knowing you don't have to have it figured out that first summer out of college, I think should be very comforting for you as a listener if you find yourself in that stage of life. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Katie. Hello, Katie, and welcome to the Nourish with Purpose podcast.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes. Well, let's just get started. Could you just give an introduction of who you are, what you're doing now, just kind of like catch people up where you're living, because that's super cool too.
Yeah, so my name is Katie Slater, and I currently am a photographer, freelance photographer. I work for myself. I mainly do fashion and branding photography, and I shoot all film, but I also do some local weddings and kind of just some side things around my community too. I live in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, which is just kind of a small little beach town that I stumbled upon in college because one of my friends beach lifeguarded here, and I just ended up continuing to come back every summer with her, and it's just snowballed into being my home. So yeah, now I'm here. It's been about 10, 12 years, I think, since I first got to the Outer Banks, and it's just a great place to have a slower lifestyle while I'm still kind of running around with work, photography, and currently enrolled in health coaching school.
Yes, and we're going to dive into that too because I would love to hear kind of like what led you to that transition. But first, I want to come back to like your move to the Outer Banks area. How did you plug into that community? Because I feel like that's something really challenging to do, especially like now you've been there, you said like 10-ish years. But how did you plug into the community and really get started growing your business there?
So I was lucky enough to kind of come right into the community and already be a beach lifeguard. So you're pretty much rolling in hot every summer. There is a couple different towns here that all have their different lifeguard agencies, and everyone is anywhere from, I don't know, 18 to 30-ish on average. So you come in, I lived with like 15 lifeguards my first and maybe my second summer. So it's just a big house, and it's really just like such a fun way to spend your summer, especially during colleges or college summers. When you just get to come down, meet new people, you're just thrown into it and you spend the day working on the beach and then hanging out around town at night. So it
Oh
was
my
just
gosh.
yeah, I know it was really fun to experience because it was easy to meet new people, but also I had one of my best friends from home. So I'm originally from DC, and her uncle actually runs the lifeguards down here. So we just kind of jumped right into
Oh my gosh. That sounds like
it.
a crazy way to spend your summer.
Yeah, it's really fun to say the least. But it's definitely a seasonal job. So when I first moved down here, it was just for summers. And then once I graduated college, it still was mainly for summer, but there's a little bit of a shoulder season. So including almost like May through October-ish. And that's just the most touristy, popular time down here. So once I kept coming back, I just started to learn more about the year-round life and just how different that looked versus just doing the summer seasons. And that's truly why I'm like still here, is the
Mhm.
local year-round community.
Wow. So throughout that time, kind of like during those college years, did you feel any pressure? Because I feel like in the summers in college, it's like, well, get an internship, like do very professional things and spend your summer that way. But it sounds like you had a totally different experience, but like the result was the same. Like you still got to plug into a community, you started your own business. Like, what did I guess that kind of look like or feel like in those years? Like, did you feel like you knew exactly what you wanted to do, or were you kind of figuring that out?
Um, that is a good question. So in college, so I went to the University of Virginia, UVA, and I played lacrosse there. So it was a D1 sport. It was a very intense and very fun, but we were, traveling pretty much around the country, especially the East Coast, throughout the year. So I think the summers to me at that time just almost looked like a little bit of a break from going so hard during the school year. I always had something going on with art, whether it was photo or I actually majored in sculpture, more like store merchandising, window stuff. So kind of, I always had things going on during the school year, pushing myself in that direction and with sports. So at that time, I think I was just happy to like chill a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. We still had to train and do just things on our own for lacrosse, but for the most part, it was just nice to go somewhere, have fun, and make some money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure mentally too, like you needed that break and physically of just like getting away from that environment. Even I think sometimes is so refreshing of like, okay, we're stepping away from Virginia and pursuing something outside of that area. So you did that in your summers. And then what did post college life look like? Like when you was starting your business the first job you ever had post college?
Um, no, I feel like it was always on the forefront as being the like close end goal, but I had to do a lot of side work, including restaurants and yeah, lifeguarding and just different kind of side jobs while I built up my photography career. So I actually, after 1 year out of college, I moved to Australia and lived in just outside of Sydney in Bondi Beach. And that was kind of a little bit of, wanting to travel and have the travel bug, but also I just was obsessed with their fashion photographers over there. It was very kind of beach surfer, but still awesome fashion brands. And I just was obsessed with photographers. So I was like, okay, I'm a little lost. I'm doing, some side work here and there. How can I actually get this photography thing rolling? And so that was just like my move. And
Oh my
yeah,
gosh. I feel like you've lived like 500 lives. Like when
I
you keep
know.
talking, I'm
I
like,
feel that way right now too.
but it's incredible. So, like with that move, then how long were you in Australia?
So I was in Australia for about 9 months and I started considering staying there for a second year, but I was only on the 1 year working visa. That's pretty easy to get when you're under 30 years old. So in order to get your second year, it's a whole other process. And I just kind of started losing relationships with my family and friends because of the time difference. It was just hard
Mm-hmm.
to continuing to connect, which has always been a big part of my life too. So I thought, okay, I'll just go home back to the States. I can do what I'm doing, but maybe in California, and then be closer to family. But that didn't happen because I left Australia around like early mid-July of that year. And I was like, I'll just go to the Outer Banks for the summer, and then I'll move to LA and go fully into fashion photography. But I pretty much moved back to the Outer Banks thinking I was just gonna make a few bucks for a month or two, but I just like fell right back into loving being here, loving only being 5-ish hour drive for my family, and just being surrounded by the culture and the community that feels most like me still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I mean, you definitely sounds like you've lived in different places. What do you feel like the characteristics of the Outer Banks have like kept you there? Like what do you really like keeps drawing you back to it?
I think everything is so much more slower, so much more slow and intentional here. Um, we don't have, crazy malls, or I mean, we obviously have shopping centers and things like that, but and it's pretty populated, but I would say
Mm-hmm.
maybe not as up to date as like being in a city or something would be. It's just a little bit slower. And honestly, that's what I love because I feel like a little bit of both internally of being someone who wants to hustle and go after my own career and be an athlete and get into everything, but live in this place where day to day it just feels like I'm on my own time. I'm not rushing around um, everywhere I go, and everybody around me is not doing the same also. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's still hustle to live here. We live on the beach, which is amazing, but it's getting definitely more expensive and things are popping up right and left. But it's just been awesome to be able to, I live about a half mile from the beach. And honestly, almost everybody lives a half mile from the beach because the island it's a very long, skinny island. So we get to see the water at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels a little bit more intentional to me.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's helped your business to actually like slow down? Because I think, like you said, like we have that internal hustle, which I feel that all the time. Just like
Mhm.
I feel like honestly, it's more like pressure I put on myself more than anything.
Yes.
But like when you're kind of forced to have like that slower pace of life, do you feel like your business has actually been more successful in your own terms of what, however you would measure success with that?
It's such a back and forth, but my initial reaction is to say no because the fashion world obviously thrives in places like LA and Miami and New York and kind of these bigger, higher fashion industry areas. And I think it's almost, I don't want to say hurt my business, but it's just made it a little bit harder. I've always been so determined to live where I want to live and work with who I want to work. And I've been told you pretty much have to live in California if you want to shoot for,
Mm-hmm.
whatever brands. And as true as I still feel like that is, we're just, I mean, fortunately, in such a different time now where we can reach out to any brand that I want. But it does typically require getting on a plane to go do the shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of getting those clients, I think I've been hustling and doing a really great job doing it. But for me personally, it's gotten to be a little tiring because I've just been traveling so much in order to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of a give and take, I guess, with um, pursuing fashion photography in a place that really doesn't have the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely is that adds like a whole nother level of complexity to it because you're not only like getting clients, but you're also having to, like you said, travel. And as much as I think people love travel, maybe you've seen it in a light where like now it's just becoming exhausting to have to like
Definitely. And
do
it
that.
was like my end goal, like my ultimate goal to be
Hmm.
traveling around the world shooting for whatever brands, and just feeling like that would be the epitome of feeling success with my career. And I've almost like I kind of started to do it the last 2 years. I went to Greece last year, and like I think I went to Greece in July, and then Montana, and then Florida, and then New York, like month after month. And I just got a little burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't take that long to get burnt out. And I was, before I was traveling so much and just doing more local shoots, I didn't necessarily feel that burnout. So it really is just like a crazy yo-yo of like trying to figure out, yes, fashion is my favorite thing to shoot, but I have to travel, but I can also shoot weddings or something local and be here. And I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it, but maybe not as much. So I don't know. It's been a whole whirlwind of kind of trying to figure it out. And on top of that, just a lot of pressure and the ebbs and flows of like being a freelancer, of needing to book that next shoot and not always knowing when it's coming, especially in the fashion world, because it can be pretty last minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is hard too when you have your own business because, like, you're 100% responsible for your paycheck. So, like, yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
can grind and hustle, but then that burnout follows. And then you're like, well, was it worth it for the financial benefit? Like, it's just a very hard balance, I think, to find and to
Definitely.
navigate. When you were traveling to all those different locations, like, what brands were you shooting for? What was your main purpose when you were going all over?
So when I went to Greece, for example, last year, it was I I designed the whole shoot. I designed the whole trip, and picked which islands I wanted to travel to, and then and this is pretty typical in the fashion world right now, with a lot of, especially with social media. There's so many amazing photographers, and now, which is kind of fun, but brands can shoot more often because the campaigns or whatever they're booking can be almost a smaller team. So a lot of the shoots that I do, and a lot of photographers now that they do, only require sometimes the photographer and model. Sometimes they'll add in hair and makeup or a stylist, but it doesn't necessarily involve like, the full lighting crew and commercial
Mm-hmm.
team you'd see in in the movies or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
But so for Greece, I pitched just me and a model. And luckily, my cousin actually was over there and she helped assist me, which was huge. But, and I pitched my storyline that I was going to do over there with the model included to a few brands out of California, one out of Australia, and then one local brand. So I ended up getting three brands and we had 3 full day shoots. And it's just kind of like running around like getting everything done. And it's definitely a whirlwind. Like you need everything to fall into place. And luckily it did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's probably my favorite trip to date. But yeah, there's unlimited brands, it seems like, out there these days. And there's so many cool ones. So it's fun to kind of see who your style matches with what, and then you can pitch yourself and your story to these brands and they pretty much approve it or not.
Oh my gosh. So you kind of like create your own, I'm assuming, portfolio of like what your brand embodies, what you want to
Mm-hmm.
capture, maybe even like outfits like that represent their brand.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. So especially this one brand I was shooting called Goonies, they are based out of Australia and they're mainly like purses and hats and beach bags. And they're really bright and colorful and very like funky styling, which is like totally my vibe when it comes to shooting. And so for a brand like that, they're accessories. So I pretty much have to plan out all the outfits and I'm just like
Mhm.
ordering clothes from, random sites or Amazon or whatever is easiest, just to kind of style and get like 10 looks out of the shoot. And that's not even what I'm supposed to be shooting. It's just for the model to have what to wear. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of details and organization that goes into it.
Yeah. I guess I just always thought that these companies maybe had a team and they were primarily responsible for all of that, but it's really cool to hear that they hire outside like individuals to shoot their product. I had no idea that
Definitely.
was like how that worked.
Some brands definitely still have in-house photographers and some brands definitely still do like the big production type of sets, but I think just with all these kind of micro brands and boutiques and things like that all around the world, and social media has just like taken off
Hmm.
because of how people can connect.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
it's been cool.
So how, or like, I guess, what would you recommend to somebody who's wanting to get into that? Like, I feel like pitching yourself, like where do you find brands? Is it off of social media? Are you like, how does that all work? And what would you recommend to somebody looking to get into that?
So it's definitely a lot about, well, okay, so I've gotten a lot of different advice on this. I swear, back when I was starting, I was like constantly trying to dig through certain, areas on social media trying to find advice. But
Hmm.
now this is such a thing that like so many people are doing it and you really can find good classes. Like I truly would encourage people to invest in themselves. I think you can't get away with just posting your photos on Instagram and like thinking a brand's going to come across your page and be like, "Oh wow, I like sure that could happen, but it's almost
Hmm.
like the same thing of like crossing your fingers that you go viral. Like,
Right.
you have to hustle for it, and I think a good starting point would really just be trying to find brands that you relate to. So I've been told that before, and sometimes still I'm like, I'm pitching, I want to go to Miami and pitch this shoot. And so I'm just gonna like blast this swimwear storyline out to, 50 brands and see who responds. And I've definitely been there and I've definitely done that. And sometimes I guess it works just by the game of numbers,
Hmm.
but I swear the clients that I have gotten that I have now shot over and over and over again are the clients that I like truly feel like I relate to. Like that Australian bag brand, just a little bit of like funk and color and liking the same type of style. We just trust each other, and it's a
Hmm.
very fun client photographer relationship. And I think I would say the same for them too. It's just like so much more seamless when you can have that open form of communication, feel like you get to know the owners or the marketing director, whoever at the brand, a little bit more personally. And I think I just came across them probably just through social media, like going down wormholes. I mean,
Hmm.
that brand specifically is sold on retailer websites like Urban Outfitters and Shopbop and Madewell, like things like that. So you really just kind of know your place, I think, a little bit. Like if you're just starting out, I mean, sure, you can reach out to a brand that's, has 500,000 followers, but like also the brands that I shoot for, some of them only have like 5,000 followers and pay way more than a brand that has 500,000 followers. So just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And in terms of wanting to get into shooting in general and photography, this is like the number one thing that my professors at UVA would told me when I was first starting out was just like to literally go on a walk and take pictures of anything that catches your eye. And you just kind of start to learn to develop a sense of style. We studied a lot of film photographers throughout history and just studying their books, like it doesn't all have
Hmm.
to be on social media because then you just end up, your stuff's going to look like everyone else's, which is hard
Hmm.
to get away from, like
Yes.
we're all on social media and no matter what we're trying to do, what industry we're in, you want to be unique, but you're like subconsciously always influenced. So
Hmm.
if I could just encourage, books, movies, all those sort of things to get inspiration from, I think that's what will set people apart and be able to get brands that they want on their team.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that originality is so hard to find too. Of like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you're just like subconsciously influenced by anything. I even noticed that in like the health and wellness space of like every
Totally.
health and wellness influencer you see or somebody trying to grow their account, like it's kind of like copy and paste, which it's hard
Yeah.
then to find like unique ideas outside of that. What would you say, I guess, would you say like going out for a walk and just like getting inspired and maybe unplugging is the best way for you to find that inspiration?
I think for photography, it's a hard question because I feel like that's definitely what I would do in the beginning when I was even learning how to use a camera and like trying to figure out my style and my eye and all that stuff. It definitely was what I did in college. Now, I will say I don't go on as many neighborhood walks with my camera. And I honestly like don't even really carry a camera around that much or as much as I used to. So now I just think I find my inspiration. Like this sounds pretty basic, but I love colors. Like I seriously love colors. If like the sky and the setting and, maybe the bathing suit they're wearing. It's just about like, to me, it's about matching the shapes and the colors and the
Mhm.
lines more so than about, I don't know. I don't know. That, yeah, probably sounds a little basic, but I swear to me, it's almost like this like puzzle that you have to figure out how to make it look best. And
Mhm.
the colors are always something that jumps out at me, which is kind of how I developed my style too. Like I definitely love a blue sky, like a bright blue sky. And I don't want to overdo it or oversaturate it or anything, but I think people would see my work and know it's mine because of the boldness in it
Mhm.
versus some like more muted, soft type of photography.
Yeah. And I feel like even just from a consumer standpoint, like I'm drawn to the color as well. Like even just looking like, at your page too, like it is very colorful. More of like I think I only follow, I don't know if you have like a business. Do you have a business account like with your
For
photography?
photography, it's just Katie Slater.
Okay.
That's yeah.
Okay, because I
Yeah,
do
so
you then
different
have
than my health account.
okay, I was gonna say because even on there, like it's just very colorful and like that always draws me to somebody's account is if it's colorful and vibrant. And I feel like that also sets you apart because I feel like there's just so many like micro trends or things that are happening where like color is maybe more consistent. Like
Mhm.
it's not more of a trendy thing, it's more of like a personal preference.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. Sometimes on the inside, I wish I could like, have my house be this like beautiful, simplistic sanctuary. And it's not, it's like this like farmhouse boho collection of random things that like I do feel like I've put a lot of time to think about where they go, but to someone
Hmm.
else, they might be like, everything looks a little random. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I think just accepting what you like over and over again, like that's how you develop your style. Like don't fight
Hmm.
against it. I feel like for so long as an artist, I tried to fight against wanting to be this like bold, colorful type of photographer because some people's like very filmy, neutral vibe was gorgeous.
Hmm.
But every time it just didn't feel right to me. And
Yes.
I think once I like gave into accepting that I wanted to go in that direction every time, then if that's just how you develop kind of your own sense of style.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I even think with what like I do on social media or even like my website, like it's gone through so many different phases because like I wanted to be more of the mindset, dewy, like I don't know. It's just like a
Yeah.
certain kind of vibe and I'm like that's just not me, but it was based off of like the coach I had worked with who her
Hmm.
stuff looked like that. And so it's like you said like actually not fighting what you want to be posting or what you want your website or your portfolio stuff to look like and just going with it because that's
Hmm.
what obviously sets you apart from the next person. Like you don't really want to look like everybody else.
Yeah, totally. And
Hmm.
I truly think even the most like famous people that are famous for like being themselves or like ridiculous weird things, like they're famous because they've stayed true to themselves so hard
Hmm.
that even in a smaller sense that us doing that now, not that we're trying to be famous, but it's just like people can see it shows and that energy shows and that's what people start to look up to. Even if your page is talking about this or that, they actually are looking up to just being like an authentic different content or page or person.
Yeah, and I think people can definitely sense what's genuine and what's not. Like
Definitely.
if you're even trying to not just grow on social media or grow your business, but like being very authentic and like showing your face and not hype, like we were just talking about the podcast. Like I edit it, but even in the past, like I used to go through and very specifically like edit out every or but, and it's like, why? Like people like
Yeah.
the transparency. They like to like talk to somebody who acts like a normal person and not, I don't know, not sounding perfect, I think is kind of
Yes.
what I at least gravitate towards because it feels genuine.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially as I'm like trying to build my health account. And I mean, really the goal through that is just to like get clients, get the word out there that I'm on this new path. Um, I'm doing the same thing, like editing out all the ums. I'm like, okay, this reel is 33 seconds and it needs to be 29. Like,
Hmm.
just things that I'm like, okay, the more I get into it, the more I need to take a step back from that stuff, because the stuff I love watching are the people that are saying, and the people that have 5-minute videos because they're just like having a good time with it, you know? So it's always like the yin yang of like, you try to be perfect, but you actually don't like perfect. So yeah, finding that middle balance, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I want to dive into kind of how you got into health coaching, but before we do that, could you talk a little bit more about burnout? Because with what starting your business, to me, that's like, oh my gosh, like it's so different than what I'm doing. Like, and to hear you say too, like the last couple of years, you kind of got to a point where like it was everything you wanted, but then you started to feel burnt out. How do you navigate that? Like with your business, are you still going to pursue it and just maybe lighten the load? What are you wanting that to look like, or how do you process burnout?
Yeah. So for the, I don't know, 10, I would say I've been doing photography professionally outside of college for probably, I'll say 8 years now or something around there. Um, and I swear the last like the first 6 years, I couldn't believe it was my job. Like it was, my passion beyond passions. I was so lucky. It was amazing. And I definitely still feel that way. But in the last 2 years, I decided to completely narrow my niche into only doing fashion. I was saying no to anything local. I was saying no to, I only took maybe a few weddings if people just randomly asked me. Like I didn't do any marketing for that. And so I was just 100% in on only shooting for brands. And I took that advice, which was great advice for the general scope of, wanting to be really successful in one department. But I pretty much was just grinding, trying to pitch stories, trying to connect with clients. It was, 95% computer time and 5% shooting time. So that already flipped my job a bit in not shooting so often and shooting being the passion. It was it really did become so much more of a job. But I, as a competitive person by nature, and maybe disciplined, I don't know which one it would be, but I just really wanted to go after it. And I was like, okay, maybe it'll take a year, maybe it'll take 2 years, maybe it'll take 6 months. I don't know, but I'm like chasing this right now and I'm going to. And so I did that for, it was working slowly, maybe not with the brands I necessarily imagined and dreamed of shooting with, but like I would get brands every once in a while and shoot some, just when I was on trips somewhere already. But then once I started like going after bigger clients, it almost became like a sales position, like where I was just trying to sell myself and my work and these pitches over and over again, which, just comes with a lot of rejection, which is part of the game, but it also is kind of hard. Probably literally for every, I don't know, 10, 15 no's, you get like one yes. And that's like over a long period of time too. So you can get, start emailing the brand, be excited about it, whatever. And then they just end up not having the budget or something like that. So I think that really started the burnout, was just not having the joy of shooting as much in my job anymore. And then once I got to a point so I went to Greece, and then, like I said, I was like traveling every month pretty much until the holidays, when things just naturally slow down just because of winter and, just slower season. But that's when I was like stressed. And money has to do with it too. Like I'm definitely not going to beat around that bush of just saying like I wasn't stressed about money, because that's just also part of the freelance world, and not knowing when you're going to get your next job. And so I think like the combination of feeling really stressed, which did not feel like me at all, and not shooting as much as I like wanted my job to be, I just like needed to take a step back from it. And I've obviously well, not obviously, but because of playing lacrosse in college and just being an athlete my whole life, I've just always really been into health and wellness. So it almost seemed like the right time to, just sign up for health coaching school. And especially because it was the off season, and just see where that could take me. And now it feels like it took some pressure off of the photography. Now that I have both going, I'm like, can take a deep breath because I don't have to book the next job like ASAP because I have a couple things going on right now. And I think that's just how I've liked to work. The advice that I got of really narrow your niche and like go for that one thing was great advice for some people, but I think I realized it's just like not for me.
Yeah. I feel like I relate to that a lot of like liking to do a lot of different things. But in the same way, like it does take pressure off of one thing because you've got
Mm-hmm.
other avenues of income, you've got other outlets to devote energy into like I really feel like for some people, like you said, that having that one thing, or even like talking about like with what you do, it's very unique. Like having a traditional 8 to 5 job for some people, that works really well because they have the structure, they have that consistent day to day schedule. My husband would say that's definitely him. Whereas I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to do everything and anything like that I enjoy because why wouldn't I,
Right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fun and freedom that comes with that, but if you are a more structured person, I could see where that would be very stressful to do
Definitely.
everything.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely so many good things that have come out of it. And by no means am I like done with the fashion brands. It's actually now that I've taken a solid step back, I'm like so excited to get into the warmer season again to be shooting and reaching out to brands. But it's been a fun little collaboration of my two worlds of like now I'm like excited to reach out to brands that have to do more with health and wellness or maybe a clean skincare line or just like there's messages that I connect with more so than just trying to get the next job, which has been a really fun avenue now that I've been in school for a little bit and still wanting to do photography.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's always interesting, like when we come to the realm of like health coaching, it's usually because us ourselves are experiencing something health wise. Like I know for me, when I got into IAN, I had chronic back pain and I was just trying to navigate that and heal that. So then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I need to take this in a different realm. Like I was doing the Western medicine that was not working for me. And I'm like, I need to try something new and something else. And so then getting certified was my next step. Is that what you feel like your experience has been? Like you were kind of burnt out, you needed something new. I know, and I don't know if you want to share this, you definitely can, but you had some health struggles on your own. Is that kind of what led you into IIN?
Yes, definitely a little bit of both. It's kind of funny because it does seem like two different worlds to me, but it obviously is me, one person. So, careers can totally label someone as who they are, especially on social media, but then you don't think about the other side of, even their health and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so it was a little bit of feeling burnt out, but then it also was a lot of it of I struggled with ovarian cysts for the last like 2 years prior to this past summer. And I mean, it was super annoying to say the least. Like sometimes, 4 days of excruciating pain and a few days in bed every month. And I just was like so over it for as much as I felt like I was taking care of my body. It was like extremely frustrating. So I last summer did a program with a functional wellness coach that was just very elimination diet based, just trying to find like triggers and if anything I was eating could be developing those cysts. And I literally didn't get them for 2 months. I was so excited. And then I got them once more. And that was this past August. And then I haven't gotten them since. So I still don't know exactly what happened, but it just made me believe in health and your body and being able to use nutrition, movement, habits, all those sort of things to heal yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think I always believed in that stuff, but that just really like put the cherry on top because it was a personal and physical um ailment, I guess, that I was like
Mhm.
experiencing all the time that finally was gone. So now I'm like, okay, like others have to do this too, you know?
Yeah. No, that's exactly how it is like you start understanding the power of food. And it sounds so woo, is what I always say. Like, okay, yeah, is food really going to do anything? And then when people see it firsthand, they're like, okay, everybody needs to know about this. Like,
Yes.
why are people underestimating how powerful what you put in your body is? And trying all these, like, I know people have tried so many different things, they've tried so many different fads, and it's done nothing. And it's like,
Hmm.
we just need to reset your body and get back to the basics and like
Definitely.
do those really well and eat really good food that isn't causing harm towards your body, and then you actually notice that your body heals from the inside out.
Hmm.
And it's just such a different feeling than just like taking something to minimize the pain, where you're actually like, especially with your cysts, like you actually got to the root cause of them and now you don't have them anymore. Like you're not just trying to cover them up and act like
Yeah.
they're not there.
Yeah, and I actually recently just got off hormonal birth control, so I was a little nervous if they were going to come back being off of that because honestly when I was getting them, I like called my OBGYN to check in and see if they could help me. And they were
Mm-hmm.
just like, just asking me if I was on birth control and that's the answer. And so I got off about a month ago. And so I've gone through like a full cycle since then. And I'm just now trying to be even more conscious of, because I would always get them around ovulation. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm just like, okay, pretty much a week surrounding ovulation, I try to essentially go back to that reset plan that I was doing in the summer to make them go away. And that's when I do that. So it's not like I'm like super restrictive all month long or anything like that. It's just about, for me, it's just about being a little bit more conscious in order to protect myself from that happening
Mm-hmm.
because I truly don't know, the science behind why it's happening. And I've gone to see a few specialists, didn't necessarily get many answers. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I was just like frustrated enough that I was like, okay, I'm just going to do what I know worked. And that really just came down to what I was eating and
Mm-hmm.
drinking.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like getting off, or I guess I should ask, was getting off birth control like scary for you? Because I feel like I know a lot of women that maybe struggle with having those cysts, but then they're like, well, if I got off birth control, it's just going to get worse because their doctors told them that that's what's actually minimizing the cysts.
Yes.
So, what
Yeah.
was that like for you?
So I definitely was nervous, but I feel, educated enough because I've been dealing with it the last few years, that I was just going to try. I would rather be clean off of hormonal birth control and take the chance to see if it happened, at least for the first few months. And
Mm-hmm.
if it did, then maybe I would have gone back to seeing OBGYNs or specialists on surrounding this stuff. But I think also the pros and cons of the health and wellness industry on social media, which I truly believe there's more pros than cons. Like, I think it's amazing that, especially with women, that it's getting spoken up so much more with birth control and
Mm-hmm.
PCOS and, all these things that seem to be very talked about on social media now. But I do think the downside of that can be that we are hearing a lot of stories that might not be us, but almost puts a little bit of fear that it could be us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something you really don't know unless you experience it and go through it. So, I wasn't going to let someone's story next to me. I think you just have to take the stories as education and not
Mm-hmm.
fear. And that's kind of where I was trying to keep my mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, and understanding too like it's an individualized like process too of like
Definitely.
you worked with a functional nutritionist to understand like what you should be doing to heal yourself, but it's not like
Mm-hmm.
you could, cuz I was even like, well, maybe you should share what your protocol was, but at the same time like it's not a copy and paste to somebody
Right.
else struggling with the same thing, although there might be like similar things in your story like you were saying, but that doesn't mean what worked for you, that exact protocol will work for someone else, which is why I feel like holistic health is so intriguing because it's kind of like your, I don't know, not playing detective, but almost, because you're like, okay, what's the root cause? Like, you're really trying to get down to the nitty gritty of any little thing that could be setting something off, which I think is like, at least for me, has made that whole space so intriguing.
Definitely. It can be hard because
Hmm.
and frustrating, honestly, because you can only try so much until it feels like
Hmm.
nothing's gonna work. But that's also where you have to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that you're kind of eliminating, okay, maybe it wasn't this, maybe it wasn't this, and you just keep trying and you find out what works for you. And yeah, you might be getting advice from social media or even just other professionals,
Hmm.
but either way, I think as long as people are being conscious and making an effort and truly like being disciplined when you do it too, which can be the hardest part, like during the months that I was working with the functional coach, like it was hard. Like it was a
Hmm.
very, I don't think restrictive is the right word, but it was just, it was elimination diet. So I wasn't eating a lot of the things that I was used to eating. And I really just, I mean, how I felt when I would get the cysts was worth it for me to give up a few months of just being, nitty gritty, trying to find like what could be triggering this. So I just think, yeah, it's not always an easy process. Like,
Hmm.
health just isn't given. Like we sometimes have to work for it. And I think that was one of the ones I had to work for. And it was really just 2 months out of the last 2 years of struggling with it, and it was all worth it. So
Hmm.
I think I mean, for me personally, even though I am a health coach, becoming a health coach, I always still love to have coaches myself.
Hmm.
And the accountability and the community and the engagement will forever be such a gift in the wellness world, because that is what will keep you positive and excited about the journey, even if it's hard and requires some discipline.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because yeah, that's and for you those 2 months were like you said, not restrictive but just challenging. When I think of my story, it's like it was a 2-year process. It's like we think it has to be, not that it has to be quick, but sometimes we want the quick fix versus like
Mm-hmm.
actually taking however long, 2 months to 2 years to even longer to see the result. Like eating in a certain way is not going to provide overnight success, but over the lifespan, I always think, I feel like I get questions of like, well, aren't you scared you're going to like lead someone astray or like harm their body by what you're telling them? I'm like, really, that's not our job. Our job is to give them like health supporting
Mm-hmm.
advice as health coaches, right? We're not really doing anything that should negatively impact their body in any
Right.
way. So, like,
Yeah,
to me, it's more of like that exploration and like, let's figure this out together versus like being afraid that we're going to harm somebody's health. Because I think both of our goal as health coaches is just to help improve how somebody feels. Like, not,
definitely.
there's no like negative side effect we ever hope to give someone.
Definitely. And it's always easier to do it with someone else, with
Yes.
even with a friend, but really, I mean, to me personally, with a coach. Like
Hmm.
it's doing something with someone else is always more fun, like we ask our friends to go to the bathroom with us when we're at a restaurant. Like it's just like
Right.
more fun, You
Yeah.
want your girls by your side.
Yes, exactly. And I always think like not that it has to be somebody you pay, but like if you think about somebody that you're like paying, like as health coaches, we don't maybe sell ourselves enough as like I'm here to support you. That is my actual job. Whereas like you could have
Mm-hmm.
friends where like yeah, they can hold you accountable for a little while, but it's just not that like long-term bond of like improving
Yes.
your health. Like that's more of like a mutual benefit. So I think like it's so powerful for this to be our job and like we get to help other people and support them as our job. Like it's just a really cool space to be in.
Definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. Because the dangerous part of doing it with your friend can also be being like, come on, let's just, go get one drink. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you have that like accountability, that's just like maybe one step higher to someone you're kind of looking up to as like you'd let them down almost. It keeps you on track until it's your own habits. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the most important part, is that we're setting our clients up to be able to do it themselves and want to do it themselves after feeling it and working with someone that will hold them to those habits until it's just natural.
Yeah, 100%. So if you can think about because you're going through IIN right now, which is the Institute of
Mhm.
Integrative Nutrition for people that don't know. It's where I got certified for health coaching. I feel like I've luckily been able to connect with so many other people going through it. But what would your ideal business look like once you graduate from that?
It's crazy because I definitely went in with being attached to a certain idea of what I wanted to do. And now talking to so many other students that are in it, and there's so many career paths you can take. And it's like so fun to think of all of them, of being like, oh my God, I could totally do that. Like the other day, I was like, wow, what if I was a restaurant consultant for menus on how to word healthy things better so people actually ordered them? Like that was just like a thought,
Yeah, this
but
is genius.
and I'm probably not going to do that, but maybe down the road you never know. And that's honestly why I was encouraged by like my parents and my fiance and people in my life that know I have a passion about health and wellness. That was like one of their first things they said when I was trying to decide if I wanted to enroll. They were just like, I mean, once you have it, you have it. You don't have to jump at something right away, but you can you can jump on things when you feel like the time is right. But that being said, I'm like so excited to jump into it already, and I have 1 month left and then we are officially graduated. So
Yay.
I know I'm excited. But pretty much, so right now I teach um an online fitness class. I was doing them live, and now I'm actually starting the recording process, so they're not live. Well, they're not live online anymore, because I will be recording them and then putting those out for people to do. But I am teaching live in person on the Outer Banks starting next month, which is very exciting. So that pretty much I want my program to be about fitness and then healthy habits and kind of like you said, like learning the basics
Mm-hmm.
without with just like a clean slate, like literally
Mm-hmm.
a reset. And I foresee my program being able to offer like a smaller group. And then I think eventually I'll build into one on one. The one on one feels a little bit more intimidating coming like straight off the
Mm-hmm.
course. But the mini group, I swear, I'm just like excited to teach other women or men, but um, around I I think I want to focus on women between, it could be any age, but really like 20s and 30s for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. And just teach them how to kind of scale everything back in their life they have going on, learn where those kind of fun times and drinking and like things like that can fit into their lives without having to cut it out completely, but teaching them what the base of healthiness would be for them, and then
Mm-hmm.
how to fit those fun things kind of in their lives. So like the program would include, going through morning routines and nighttime routines and how to create a balanced plate, what foods, whole foods, protein, all that kind of stuff. Just honestly, just like getting back to the basics. Like we have
Mm-hmm.
so many options and craziness like surrounding us at all times that it's hard to scale back to just like Whole Foods. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like it is. But once you do it, I swear it's like delicious and it's not.
Yes.
So yeah, just if that was like a long-winded way to just say I want my program to be about forming habits that'll stick and just creating a lifestyle where you feel like you have a mindset of like clarity.
Mm-hmm.
I always say whenever I feel like my best and my healthiest, like maybe I was super attentive to all my habits throughout the week or something, I always say to my fiance, like, I feel like everything seems like life seems like clear.
Yes.
Like you just feel your energy's better. You feel like you can see where you want your career to go. You can see you're excited for workouts. Like it's a lot of positive energy. And I just want to be like a hype woman and get other people to feel that clarity.
Yes, I love that. And it's the basics that we talk about are actually, I feel like, not so basic because nobody's doing it. Like not
Right.
nobody, but so many
Yeah.
people struggle to do the basics. Like, it's like, well, I've tried everything, but like, are you drinking enough water? Are you eating enough protein?
Yes.
Like
Literally.
that could be night and day difference in how you feel, and you're just not doing it consistently. So I love that. And I'm so excited to see how you build up from here, because even since the last time we talked, like now you're leading in-person exercise classes and you're starting your website. Like that was what, 3 weeks ago? Like it's insane.
I know, it is kind of crazy. It feels like I'm not doing that much in terms of it being my business right now. I mean, it's getting there kind of thing. But then I do look back on just like a year ago from now, and I was literally doing nothing, in terms of like marketing and trying to get out there and make this a whole new part of my life. So it's been really fun, and it's kind of crazy, but it's exciting.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's been so nice to talk to you. I want to finish with the signature question I ask every guest on the podcast. Okay. So on this podcast, we talk about how our purpose isn't necessarily linked to a specific job or role, but rather it's those characteristics that you possess that allow you to live a meaningful life. So, Katie, what would you say is your purpose?
I think my purpose, and I feel like I kind of just mentioned this a little bit, but I really feel like my purpose is to be like a hype girl. And I love community. I love the engagement, which is also kind of funny, working for myself and by myself, that like I crave just being around other people's good energy. And also, if they're not having the good energy, wanting to be the energy to bring them up. And I think that just falls so in line with the health and wellness space and health coaching. And again, just having clarity on life. So
I love that. Well, share your socials. Where can people find you and get connected with you?
Okay, so I have a couple socials, but my photography is at Katie Slater, KatieSlater. And then my wedding photography is at Katie Slater Wed. And then my health coaching is at Katie Slater Health. So
Okay.
Type in Katie Slater and one of them will pop up.
Yes. And I'll link that in the description of today's episode so you can be sure to find her and get connected with her. But thank you so much for being here, Katie. It's been so nice to talk to you.
So nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Nourish with Purpose podcast. If you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, TikTok, Lemon8, YouTube, or Bailey Seaton on Facebook. I'll have all of my links below to connect with either me or Katie, so be sure to check that out. And again, be sure to enter that giveaway if you'd like to be entered for a $100 gift card to get some free groceries. So with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.